Hi, I'm Jim. If you've ever loved someone emotionally avoidant, felt like you were the only one keeping the connection alive, and now you're quietly stepping back not for attention, but because your soul is tired, then this video is for you. Today, we'll be unpacking the powerful message behind the video titled 7 Silent Moves That Destroy Your Avoidant Ex's Ego. And to be clear, everything we're discussing is within the scope of fair use for educational, psychological, and healing purposes only. There's no intent to infringe, just to illuminate and support. This isn't about tactics. It's about transformation, about learning how to walk away quietly, not to punish, but to come home to yourself. Silence, when it no longer asks to be heard, becomes the loudest thing you've ever said, and you never have to say a word. If you're ready to stop proving your worth through chasing and start reclaiming your peace, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with me until the end of the video. I'll guide you on how silence can stop being passive pain and become your personal power. When you step out of the role of the one who always chases, the one always trying to fix things, the one who takes the blame, explains too much, and fills the silence with painful effort, you're not just creating distance, you're making a powerful shift. It's the moment you realize that real love should never demand self-abandonment, that it should never cost you your inner peace just to hold on to a connection that never made you feel safe in the first place. And when you finally let go, not out of bitterness, but because your soul is tired of proving your worth to someone who was never ready to receive it, your silence becomes a quiet earthquake that ripples straight through your avoidant ex's ego. They're used to your presence. They never feared losing you, because you were always the one who texted first, who reached back out after their withdrawal. But now you don't call them back. You don't check their stories. You don't post cryptic quotes or hints. You simply stop. And that stillness, that's what disorients them most. The ego of an avoidant doesn't know how to process the emptiness you once filled. They assumed you'd never leave, that you needed them to feel okay. But now that you no longer make loud sadness out of being ignored, now that your silence is calm, not dramatic, not bitter, they start to lose their sense of control. What I want you to deeply understand is this. This silence isn't a tactic to manipulate or get them back. It's the result of inner awakening when you no longer need someone else to see you in order to know your worth. You pull back not to bait them in, but to return to yourself. And that is an act of self-respect and maturity the avoidant rarely encounters, because it lies outside their domain of control. Your energy used to be expansive in this relationship, but you gave it all away. Now, you turn inward. You no longer pour that energy into composing long texts or waiting for replies. You invest it into meditation, writing, connecting with people who actually want to know you. And as you walk away quietly, steadily, you teach yourself the most sacred truth. You deserve a love you never have to chase. And here's the paradox. When you stop caring, the avoidant starts feeling. Not because they suddenly know how to love right, but because your silence forces them to face what they can't control. But let me be clear, that's no longer your concern. This journey was never about getting them back. This is about you rising, standing tall, and never losing yourself again. After stepping out of the role of the chaser and reclaiming your inner strength through dignified silence, we now move into the second silent move, one of the most subtle, yet powerfully disruptive, not reacting to crumbs. This is the stage where the avoidant, so used to your predictable presence, begins to send signals to test whether you're still emotionally orbiting them. You know those messages. Hey stranger, how have you been? A casual like on an old photo, or a vague reply to your story. On the surface, they seem harmless. Some might even stir your heart because behind each is a flicker of hope. Maybe they've changed. Maybe they finally miss me. Could this be the start of something new? But if you've been caught in that cycle long enough, you know. This isn't a genuine invitation, it's an emotional check-in. Avoidants don't always come back out of love. Often, they return when they sense they've lost control. These little breadcrumbs are their way of gauging your temperature. Are you still attached? Are you still easy to pull back in? And the moment you don't react to, don't reply, don't rage, don't block, don't delete, you simply leave it on, seen but ignored, the power dynamic begins to shift. Silence, in this case, isn't just non-action. It's a statement. It says, I saw that, and I no longer invest energy in it. And to someone avoidant, someone who thrives on emotional pull, that is a subtle but potent form of rejection. That rejection doesn't scream. It doesn't come through a paragraph explaining their wrongs. It arrives through indifference. You no longer interpret every small gesture as a beginning, but as a final echo of a connection already gone. And when you can see a crumb as what it truly is, a control tactic, not affection, you've taken another step in emotional recovery. Remember, not responding isn't about playing a game. It's not about making them chase. This isn't about them anymore. This is about pulling your emotional power back into your own hands. You don't need closure. You don't need promises. You don't need hope, because you've already given those things to yourself. You let that message sit, not to hurt them, but because it no longer deserves your attention. I know it's not easy. For those with anxious attachment, not responding can feel like walking a tightrope. You may wrestle for hours or days with the urge to reply, to ask, what does this mean? To keep the connection alive, even in its faintest form. But pause, breathe. Ask yourself, is this lover just the reflex of an old wound? When you can recognize bait and refuse to bite, you've grown. You've shifted from reactive to self-led. And for the avoidant, your quiet refusal, though they may never admit it, is a direct crack in the ego armor they thought you'd never dent. So if you've ever asked, should I reply just to be polite? The answer is, you owe no one a reply, especially not someone who was indifferent to your heart. And in that moment of non-response, you are not weak. You are protecting your dignity. Transitioning into part 3. Next, we'll explore another form of powerful silence. When you glow up quietly, not to prove anything, but to evolve into someone who no longer needs to be seen to know their own worth. After you've mastered the first silent move, stopping the chase, and passed through the emotional bait without reacting, you now enter a new phase, glowing up quietly, the evolution that happens without an announcement. This is the moment you return to your internal power, where every transformation is grounded in self-respect, not performance. You don't need to post, "I'm fine," or "look how happy I am" on social media. You don't need to show off trips, new outfits, or radiant selfies just to prove you're surviving. Instead, you're silent and still doing well. You pour your energy into your life, your career, your health, your relationships, your passions, not to prove anything to anyone, but because you matter to yourself. While they wait for you to react, you're building habits. You're journaling, working out, reading, reconnecting with friends who see the real you. Slowly, you realize that the most powerful energy doesn't come from being validated by others, it comes from recognizing yourself. Each morning you wake up feeling lighter, more centered, and you don't need anyone else to confirm it. You're not changing to prove them wrong. You're changing because you've realized you were never meant to chase happiness, it was always meant to live within you. This growth shows up in small wins: a calm evening walk, a healthy meal, a productive day, a meaningful conversation, a book that makes your world bigger. When you look back, you don't need applause. You feel pride because you see yourself clearly. And here's the magic: your silence is no longer empty, it's full. They sense it. They realize you no longer need them. No one says it out loud, no one admits it, but the energy shift is undeniable. You've stepped into your confidence, the kind that no longer needs performance, only presence. You no longer belong to that relationship not in the way you once believed. You now belong to a life that honors your self-worth, where love is no longer a source of depletion but a reflection of your inner fullness. Yes, they may still pop in a vague message, a soft memory wrapped in nostalgia, but you don't bite, you don't spiral. You feel it, observe it, and release it. These signals no longer hook you because you've chosen not to let them land. This is the silent victory, not because you've forced them to see your glow, but because you've become so steady that you don't need to be seen. You've built a version of yourself that stands tall in peace, and that's exactly what they didn't expect. Whether or not they notice, you are shining, and that kind of radiance can't be controlled, explained, or interrupted. Transitioning to part 4, in the next section, we'll explore what it means to stay silent when they reach out during their low moments and why, sometimes, the most compassionate closure is no response at all. Following your silent glow-up of quiet confidence, we move into part 4, staying silent when they return during their vulnerable moments. Before, you were that emotional safety net, the cushion absorbing all their turbulence. They came to you in moments of insecurity, loneliness, or crisis, and you, with genuine compassion, were always there to catch them. But now, everything has changed. When they come back reaching for you, will you still answer? The answer is not out of revenge, but because you've learned that saving them is no longer your responsibility. You are not their emotional first responder, and you don't have to be there to patch up their instability. This silence is not a temporary rejection, it is a declaration. I refuse to be the safety valve for your emotional inconsistencies. So when they knock, you do not answer. You might not smile. You might not respond to their message even with a line. You do not persuade or argue, you gracefully accept their flaws and maintain your boundaries. This is a powerful choice, an act of self-respect, because you know that your mental health and energy are worth more than any plea they might make. You deserve stability, relationships where support is mutual, not one-sided. When they return in emotional turmoil, you no longer respond like you used to. Instead, you sense clearly. Your heart is no longer a planned broken in safe haven. You've established an emotional boundary. I am not obligated to heal you. I am committed to healing myself. Here's the beauty. When you stand firm in silence, without explanation, you give yourself safety, peace, and self-worth. You allow yourself to only show up when people are ready to meet you in emotional integrity, not when they are unstable and need a temporary fix. Think of yourself as a sanctuary not locked away, but not a convenience store for emotional bailouts. You have become solid because you know that sometimes silence is healing not for them, but for you. Transitioning to part 5, next we will explore the vanishing mirror effect, where you not only respect your own space, but also refuse to reflect them anymore through your presence. Building on part 4's stance of silent boundary setting, we step into part 5, vanishing like a mirror. This is no ordinary disappearance. It's about dissolving the reflection you once provided, the image they shaped themselves through. In an avoidant relationship, you were often used as a mirror, reflecting admiration, affection, and importance back at them without requiring them to reciprocate. That reflection felt powerful, but it only lived when you were present. When you vanish quietly, without drama, you stop reflecting. No more affirmations, no more emotional validation. You just vanish. Suddenly the mirror is gone, and they're left looking at emptiness, a void where they once saw their worth. They have to face that emptiness, the insecurity they never allowed themselves to feel. Your silence carries double meaning for them. First, the loss of external emotional supply, no more comfort they casually accessed. Second, the removal of their external reflection, forcing them to face their shadow, their anxieties, their fear of disconnection, their need for external validation. That is why simply disappearing without saying anything is more powerful than any declaration. Instead of continuing as their emotional crutch, you choose not to be there, and that forces them to look inward, confronting the void they've kept hidden. You might wonder, if I vanish like that, won't they forget me? That question reveals the lingering hope that you still hold power over them. But you've realized your value doesn't depend on their recognition, and if they forget you, it's okay, because you are no longer their emotional safety valve. You lose nothing. You simply return the responsibility of validation to them. During this phase, it's essential that you stop all actions that signal your presence. No more likes, no comments, no story glimpses. You simply recede. Continue building your own life, pursuing your goals, nurturing real connections, not to prove you're fine, but because you are. Surround yourself with people who value you, not the reflection you offered. This is not a game or manipulation. It's a deliberate choice. You owe them no validation, no narrative. You don't need to prove you're irreplaceable. You just live resilient, consistent, whole. The true magic happens when they realize the mirror has shattered. They may begin to ask themselves, who am I without someone to reflect my worth? Do I have value on my own? In that moment, your distance becomes a powerful echoing example of dignity and self-respect that lingers just long enough to awaken awareness. And you, on the other side of that silence, find yourself no longer defined by what once was. You walked away whole, intact, carrying the quiet strength of your return to yourself. Transition into part 6, where we'll explore how to emotionally detach without explanation, no dramas, no closure needed, and why this final act can close the old chapter and usher in a new, authentic love. Building on the vanishing mirror phase, where you no longer reflect their needs or validation. We move into part 6, letting go emotionally without explanation. This is one of the most profound and quietly powerful steps in your healing journey. Closing the emotional loop not with long letters, tears, or final conversations, but with your own serenity before the chapter closes. In the avoidance playbook, where emotional openness is carefully controlled, they leave vague endings on purpose. No final goodbye, no clear, "I'm done." This ambiguity serves as a safety buffer, an option to return at their convenience. It leaves your heart in limbo, but at some point, you realize you no longer need their validation to say goodbye. You won't write them a long emotional letter. You won't sit and cry while explaining everything. And you won't wait for them to provide closure for you to move on. Instead, you quietly close your own emotional circle. You release every hope and every longing. You give yourself the final parting. Not because you no longer care, but because you care enough about yourself to let go. When you let go in peace, you send the strongest message possible. You've matured enough not to require drama, not to let your heart hang on a last explanation. This isn't easy. You may still feel nostalgic, the sting of loneliness, the vague ache of absence. But you acknowledge those feelings as uninvited guests and let them pass without clinging to them. You might journal, cry privately, reach out to a friend, or sit in stillness, but all of this is for you, not to get them to understand you. It's your healing, not their apology. Why is this self-closure so powerful? Because it shifts the power from outside you. No longer wait for a message or an explanation to inside. You give yourself wholeness. It sends a compelling statement. I am no longer adrift in emotion because I have walked my own path. When you let go without depending on them, you embody true adulthood. No permission needed to end. No approval required to move forward. You step into the next chapter of your life, light yet empowered. And if they ever resurface, they're no longer the same. They're just a closed page you once read. And now, you can truly take pride because you may be stronger than anyone ever expected. Stronger than to need explanations. Stronger than to let anyone else hold the reins of your emotion. You created your own closure, fully mature and self-reliant, and that speaks louder than any words ever could. Transitioning to part 7, in the final section, we'll explore how to protect your boundary through digital departure, letting your life move forward undisturbed by the blurred messages of your past. After mastering the powerful act of letting go emotionally without needing explanation, a milestone of true emotional maturity, we now arrive at the final chapter, withdrawing from the digital space. No drama, no announcement, no angry blocking, just a calm, intentional disappearance. In silence, you deliver the loudest message they cannot ignore. In the digital age, your online presence on platforms like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok is more than just social activity. It becomes a symbolic heartbeat of your emotional availability. For an avoidant who used you as a mirror and a source of validation, even the smallest trace, like a viewed story, a subtle comment, can serve as evidence that they still matter to you. But now, there is nothing. No views, no reactions, no breadcrumb of presence. When they check your page and find it eerily still, that nothingness becomes a devastating blow to the illusion that they are still on your mind. Digital silence delivers two powerful hits. It strips away control. They can no longer gauge where you are emotionally or keep tabs on your life through the screen. It forces them to confront your absence with no reflection from you. They must face the emptiness they've been avoiding. And you didn't need to shout, announce, or block in fury. You simply vanished with quiet dignity. This lands far deeper than any performative goodbye. They may search for signs of you, hoping for a crack, for proof you still care and find nothing. That nothing is not emptiness, it's your self-worth, finely guarded. In this phase, you continue refining your life. You curate what you share, not to impress, but because it reflects your true self. You focus on real-world connections, not digital traces. You notice the subtle shifts in your peace. Each day, you don't check their story. You breathe a little easier. Most importantly, you stand in full sovereignty. You are no longer chasing shadows or waiting for digital scraps. When you no longer exist in their feed, it means you've taken back everything. Freedom from dependency, respect for yourself, and emotional sovereignty. No screen can override. This isn't bitterness or punishment. It's sacred self-respect, choosing not to show up in a space that once hurt you. It's clarity in action, not performance. It's power without noise. And as you move forward, each day unfolding with more inner stability, you'll realize your life doesn't need their digital traces to remain whole, beautiful, and yours. No stories watched yet you smile freely. No follows exchanged yet you are rich in self-worth. No interactions left yet your soul is full. Transitioning into the conclusion, we'll wrap up this journey through 7 silent yet powerful moves choices, not made to destroy your avoidant ex, but to return home to your center, restore your power, and reconnect with the part of you that never needed to beg to be seen. And just like that, we've reached the end of the journey through the 7 silent moves, subtle on the outside, but thunderously loud in their impact. Not loud in noise, but loud in truth. These choices weren't made to destroy anyone, but to reclaim yourself. To return to a version of you who no longer begs to be seen, but simply is worthy, whole, and free. Maybe once you believed that if you were just good enough, patient enough, loving enough, they would come back and finally see you. But here's the deeper truth. The only return that matters is your return to yourself. When you stop chasing closure, stop needing apologies, stop waiting for someone else to validate your experience, you begin to build a life that is no longer orbiting around them. Every action you've chosen from no longer chasing, refusing their breadcrumbs, glowing in silence, staying absent when they reach out in crisis, disappearing from their emotional mirror, letting go without explanation, and finally retreating from their digital world are all acts of radical self-respect. They're not about being cold, they're about knowing that you loved enough to let go. And the beauty is this: when you stop needing to be understood, you finally understand yourself. When you stop needing them to witness your glow-up, you truly begin to shine. When you no longer look to them for closure, you realize you've always had the key. If one day they do feel the absence and begin to regret them, it's no longer your responsibility to make them see, to make them change. You're no longer a supporting character in their story. You are now the main character in your own. Remember this: your silence is not emptiness, it is rebirth. It is the most powerful message you've ever sent. I've learned to love myself more than anyone who couldn't. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to leave a comment below. Not just for me, but for others who may be walking the same road and need to see someone else speak the words they can't yet form. And if you want to continue growing, healing, and standing taller in your truth, hit that subscribe button. This journey isn't easy, but I promise you, you're not walking it alone.